Welcome in. That's right. It is the deeper dive as we look at a two-game juicy slate. The boss man, Alex Baker's in the house. Ben Raza's in the house. And I know you're asking yourself, well, who the fuck is this guy? Don't worry. I know it's been a while since I've been on the DFS channel, but I'm here as well. Eytan, most importantly, though, you are here. Tyler is producing. We appreciate you all being a part of what we're about to do, which is essentially just use our tools on Stokastic alongside our two sharp experts and make you some money. So what are we going to ask in return? That you hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. And oh, by the way, remind people that as they come in, we have a great community to do that. Let's do it. Let's get to work here. Alex, Ben, Alex, must be a rough day here. I don't know how many people said no in order for me to be in Lofty's seat, but I'm happy to be here with y'all.
Yeah, I mean, we bullied Laffy, and he no longer wants to be on the show with us in the playoffs. It's sad, but excited to be here. First day of playoffs and some big prizes, so it'll be a good one.
No doubt about it. Listen, it's playoff football. We played 18 weeks. Obviously, I'm excited for this. We're going to talk short slates, different strategies. Great day of sports altogether. College basketball, MMA, all sorts of things. But I as Alex said, a lot of money up for grabs with these two games. I'm very excited to see where you guys are going in this slate.
Ben can't help himself. He always has to mention, slide in all the shit he's betting on.
I can't help it. There's too much going on today.
Right. He had to remind us that he's working in an MMA slate. He's working in everything else here too with that. But you do bring up a point, Ben, and I think this is a great way to start because it is the first opening day of wild card action. We do have a shorter slate. So we have a couple of things working that aren't the norm, right? It's a wild card day, but it's also a short. It's not like even tomorrow where we have that third game. So let's just look at this overall before we start diving into these games and where we are with the slate. Just the strategy that you guys like to apply here when you're looking at the wild card, which is going to be different, of course, as you get deeper in and the talent level ideally evens out. So there may be some more gaps here to exploit when you're looking at the wild card round, Ben. And then the flip side, and both you guys, right, can get into this, just how you approach the shorter slate, also knowing that it's still wild card action.
I mean, for me, and I obviously want to hear Alex's thoughts on this. When you only have 4 teams, there's just not that many options, and raw points become more important in some ways than points per dollar. You know that you're going to see some weird stacks where you capture a ton. And one thing I'm just going to throw out very quickly, the majority of lineups will have players from every team. So right off the bat, if you only use 3 teams, that's a way to be different. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to be different. You're going to be leaving money on the table. But some of these like onslaughts where you omit a team is one strategy amongst many. And Alex, I know you've talked about that before, just trying to be different when we just don't have that many options.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think game theory is going to come into play big time here. And the one thing is if you play like defense and you don't have any players from the other team, like that is going to limit the number of possible combinations significantly and make it so your chance of like having the same lineup as someone else is pretty high. So it might be good to even play defense, take a player from the opposing team and maybe fade a third team. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this one.
Awesome. And, you know, you mentioned game theory here. We have a pretty large spread. And Ben, you mentioned that it was raining, so we love the weather, right? Whenever the weather comes in and impacts games, doesn't matter what game it is that we have and what sport that it is. If weather's going to impact it, our eyebrows perk up a little bit. But this is expected to be, at least when you look at the spread, when you look at just the gap between talent level here, outside of Brock Purdy, who we'll talk about individually. But overall, the Niners are expected to roll here with San Francisco. So again, the creativity may be finding guys either in blowout mode, or maybe it is that third or fourth option that you can pinpoint that happens to be fueling some offense for the Niners, or flip the script, right, Alex, and say, all right, well, look, everybody's focused on the Niners rolling the Seahawks. What happens if Seattle does keep this close? What happens if Seattle is up by a field goal heading into the fourth? Somebody on Seattle has to be doing work here that may be overlooked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how you approach this first game is going to be huge in your success tonight. And it is a little rainy. The wind is around 15 miles an hour. So it's going to be maybe an ugly game potentially. I mean, the over/under is not high. Seattle's only projected for 16 points, so their offensive potential here, we're seeing in the sports books, it's saying is pretty limited. So right off the bat, you're faced with a tough decision is how to handle Seattle, because they're not going to project very well, but you're trying to get a little bit different on a 2-game slate. So it's a tough spot.
Yeah, Ben, go. I'm sorry. I know you were.
No, it's that's the balance, and kind of, I can already tell you the theme of what I'm going to be saying today. It's, if a play makes a ton of sense, he's going to be 60% owned, and that's great. But we can't just throw all those guys in, and looking at, our ownership here at Stokastic, you're not going to be able to get away with that. So we have to balance. Do we want to play some suboptimal people like Geno Smith? Let's start there. He's going to be the lowest, in my opinion, the lowest owned of the 4 quarterbacks. He's in a brutal matchup. He already played them twice. He threw 1 total touchdown. It's not a good situation in the rain and the wind. But is it worth it when we're trying to beat hundreds of thousands of people, to maybe look to him and Lockett and even Metcalf? I could make a case for that. I think everyone's going to go to Kenneth Walker to start. And that's, I have no problem with that. But I'm not just throwing out Geno Smith in terms of pulling him off the board. I actually think he makes for a very interesting against the grain play today.
Yeah, I think you look at the 2 obvious pivots, right, from the top 2 options here in Herbert and Lawrence, and it's going to be Purdy and, to a lesser extent, Geno. So maybe that's it, Alex, right, to Ben's point, where let the world figure out that, let them go to Brock Purdy and think, oh, we're going to outsmart the field by going to Brock Purdy. Well, now you can outsmart the people who are outsmarting the field by getting a little more Geno Smith. Now, again, there's risk, right? Because he's at the bottom and projected down there and less owned for a reason. But if that thing pops, now all of a sudden you are countering a large amount of the field.
Yeah, I think with Geno Smith, what you're really hoping for is this first game is a shootout, because everyone's going to be stacking up the Chargers versus Jags game. Not many people are going to load up their lineup with all the San Francisco and Seattle players, because the most likely thing is this game is going to be a little bit ugly. So if I'm going for Geno Smith, I'm really going ham on the whole Seahawks team. So I'm getting like 3 or 4 other Seahawks, just kind of anticipating he's going to have a lot of production to be in the winning lineup here. And probably throwing in McCaffrey, because I expect he's going to have more and more involvement the closer this game is. One guy that I'm curious you guys take on is Colby Parkinson on the Seahawks. He's looking like maybe a good value play today. He is kind of taking over for Will Dissly at the tight end 2 position. So maybe he'll be popular. I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's right in your wheelhouse. I'm sure, Eytan, you got him like first 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, we got a ladder. We got a nice little ladder here.
God.
Okay, so I actually have a guy that I was thinking of on that level, and I love how Alex is just opening the door with the depths here, because Ben's right. Like, I'm mining you. You don't know this, Alex, but I'm mining you for 2 TD data today that I can bet absurd, obnoxious minus EV stuff. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Will Dissly, and when he was there and functional in some capacity, it was in at least a scoring threat. So he could maximize that in kind of that secondary tight end role. I don't see why, Ben, there wouldn't be at least some looks to him in that same role, assuming that this offense is able to go. I think the biggest question mark is, well, what do you do against this Niners defense? But again, if they're focused on the bigger names, right up to the top guy on that chart there, this could open something up absolutely for Parkinson, and you're paying so little for him in the return.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't even think we need to talk about the risk with someone like that, particularly because if you're playing Geno, you've already incurred a lot of the risk. Like, if the Niners shut out the Seahawks, it doesn't matter if you played Parkinson with Geno or Geno with other people, you have no chance. So we know that if Geno Smith has to drop back, and he threw the ball 44 times against this Niners defense in week 15, say we get that type of volume, he could throw a couple picks. There could be a couple turnovers, and that might actually help him. in a way. You could play the Niners defense against the Seattle stack. I don't even mind that. So if you want to look to a guy like Parkinson, where I think most people are going to click Fant, that's more than reasonable. You get extra money for guys like McCaffrey and Eckler, who we'll talk about in the next game. I'm fine with it. You just know what you're getting with the 16-point team total.
Man, Kyle Mitz reading my mind there. Cade Johnson was another guy that, and look, Ben, I bet him. All right, if he scores a touchdown, I'm tagging you to score a touchdown. All right, that's
Right.
it. That's all I needed to do. Right, and I'll tell you even the book that I did coming up in a second. But with that said, you're trying to find, I think, with Seattle, there are two angles, right? It's trying to find somebody who's not as popular that you can definitely target to do something that's unexpected. But look, there's also the heavy belief here that the Seahawks are going to get their ass kicked. So it may not be starters in the entire time. Pete Carroll may not do that to his guys if they're down by 35 points in the fourth quarter, which against the Niners, anything is truly possible here. So you can look at blowout. Like, I know you don't normally target that, but maybe in a shorter slate, especially in a one-off here where the Niners have handled teams, that's not outside the realm of possibility either to target somebody just for that.
I mean, I don't mind reaching for some guys that are going to be on the field potentially, but I do think with 2-game slates, the mentality always is first, like, I got to find this is like showdown. Oh, I have to find this like crazy secret guy. And yeah, you can look to that, but more often than not, when you look at the winning lineup, it's all reasonable plays. It's just a weird combination, a weird permutation of, a game theory aspect where you leverage in a different way. So I tend to say, okay, I want to get my guys in pretty good opportunities. I'd rather roll the dice with, Seattle players in general that are out there a lot than trying to find this under the radar guy, even though it's clear he'll be very low owned if you somehow get any production.
All right, let's do this. We have now over 1,000 people hanging with us. So let's remind a couple of things. First and foremost, just you better hit that thumbs up button, please. Like that's all we're asking. Baseline stuff here, that you subscribe here, the Odd Shopper channel. We have a bunch of channels here on the mothership at Stokastic. So we ask you to take a second and be a part of everything. The show, No House Advantage, we'll tell you a little deeper into that, but we have links all over the place here for you. And we'll match your first deposit up to $100. We'll get into that a little deeper in the midway point. But just to remind everybody as they keep filing in here, Alex, how are you building today? Assuming that you're going through multiple lineups and having multiple builds, what's the Seattle shocks the world build? What's the Seattle wins this game? And maybe it's not by a last second field goal. Maybe Seattle is up, and maybe Seattle's up by 7 to 10 points kind of throughout it. How do you approach that outside of, who we talked specifically with Geno Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Seahawks defense, that's pretty interesting because if San Francisco's ahead, they're probably not going to pass a ton, but if Seattle wins the game, there's going to be more dropbacks for Brock Purdy. He's been good, but small sample. Like it could, it wouldn't be a shocker if he came out and threw a few picks, maybe a pick 6. So I definitely think the Seahawks defense is intriguing. Kenneth Walker is a great option. I think because the weather is kind of unfavorable in this game, you're going to see more rushing attempts on average and perhaps more short targets, which could go to the running back position. So those would be my 2 favorite Seahawks.
Ben, you building that?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to plan for that. We just actually, our man, Jorge,
yes,
perfect timely super chat, and it's about Walker versus Niners defense. So I think you're balancing. It's again, I'm not going to spin it that it's a good matchup because it's not. But let's look at what he's been doing. Week 16. He had 26 carries and 2 targets. Week 17, 23 carries and another target. Week 18, in a gotta have it game against the Rams, he had 30 total touches. Like, if you get 30 touches, even against the Niners defense, you're probably going to run into some success, even if it's not on an efficiency standpoint. So from that angle, I think that you still can look to him. As Alex said, I wouldn't be stunned to see him actually have, not Eckler, he's not gonna have 15 targets, but 3 to 5 targets, something like that can boost the floor there. You hope for pass interference in the end zone, maybe get him a cheapie, because it's hard to run against the Niners. But I'm still comfortable with Kenneth Walker just because of how significant that volume is on a short slate.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think? I know we want to hit the Niners here, right? And talk a little bit about that. And I think the easiest place to start with San Francisco would just be how viable it is to fade a guy like McCaffrey, right? Because everybody and their mom and dad and everybody's going to be heavily loading up on McCaffrey. But what do you think is the most unlikely scenario in this game? Seattle winning by 10 plus points, right? And I'm not fishing for a bet, Ben. I see you smiling there. No, I'm not. Margin of victory, anything like that. I'm not. But as far as points are concerned, like I would imagine this game going over like 47, 48 points would be pretty surprising. Maybe even 51 points would be pretty surprising to me. So I don't know if you're looking at now, as we talked about San Francisco and McCaffrey is a big part of this, if you even see that type of high scoring game, or if it's more like, the 24-17 type that people are pushing.
Yeah, I mean, so clearly, I just spent 10 minutes talking about Seattle. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
The most likely scenario is that they do really struggle. They're 9.5-point underdogs on the road against a really good team. There's no doubt about it. So when you get to San Francisco, obviously they're going to have much higher owned players who project really good. Looking at our projections, looking at our tools, obviously a guy like Christian McCaffrey is at the top of the board. He's going to be extremely popular, but it's hard to not think that if the game stays close, that's even better for him. And if the game is a blowout, he probably got there. So I have nothing bad to say about him. I think week 18 was more gearing down. I expect 20 plus touches for McCaffrey, and he would be at the top of the board. You need to get over 50% significantly if you want leverage, because he's going to be over 50% in your tournaments.
Awesome. You think so, Alex, what are you doing with McCaffrey as far as any fade opportunity, or are you just going to eat the chalk here with C-Mac?
Well, we have limited options, so I think I'm going to play McCaffrey a lot. The main thing I'm thinking here is Eckler is also going to be very popular. There are similar price points, and I just prefer McCaffrey. I mean, there's a higher chance of team success. Their roles receiving and rushing, it's like almost parallel, like their usage. So I do think McCaffrey is probably a little bit safer, but the only thing I'm kind of worried about is that you really like to play Eli Mitchell to spell McCaffrey. So in some builds, I'm kind of going Eli Mitchell and McCaffrey, hoping that there are just a lot of rushing attempts from the 49ers today. And then if you go with that combo, you're done with the running back position. So it's pretty intriguing.
I like that, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, you can. That's the other thing. Like, if you want to try to isolate some of the McCaffrey ownership, not a lot of people are going to do that. So say McCaffrey gets there and it's a 38-10 type game, and they run the ball 40 plus times. Well, it's not going to be all McCaffrey. Mitchell can also get there, and then you've kind of boxed out a lot of the McCaffrey builds. I think the wild card for me, Eytan, though, is Deebo, because he was hurt. He wasn't there. He comes back in week 18, doesn't do anything, but they didn't need him to. Is he going to get back into this backfield? Should we expect, 4 or 5 carries and a handful of targets for him? Because Deebo is, before they had McCaffrey, he was the do everything guy, and he's sub 6K. He's the guy that I'm not really sure what to do, but I do think he could really shake things up for the Niners and for your lineups.
Eli, not Deebo.
No, I'm saying Deebo.
Okay.
Deebo to me is a mystery. Like, I think Eli's going to get his touches behind McCaffrey, but I don't see a path to, barring an injury or something. Like, I'd be stunned if Eli Mitchell has like 15, 20 touches. Deebo, who knows exactly with what they're going to do with him. Obviously, he was hurt, and now he's back. I didn't think week 18 was indicative of what his workload could be today.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would just assume that people, and again, the ownership may reflect this a little more as we get closer to lock here, but I would imagine that if people are going to pivot off, right? I mean, you've got Kittle and McCaffrey, right? So those guys, you mentioned Eckler, Alex, rightfully so. He's going to catch the second most, and it's probably not going to be that wide of a gap of ownership just in general when it comes to that position, really on the slate. So you've got McCaffrey and then Kittle on the other side, clearly, maybe Evan Engram as well, but we'll talk about him coming up. I would think just in this game, if you wanted to pivot in this position, you kind of have a really good one. And you've been on him. I know we've been talking about him from the Odd Shopper to the Stokastic channels and in between. And that's Brandon Ayuk, right? Like you've got a guy right now who last I checked was in that like 26, 27% range, what we have on our Stokastic ownership projections, which on a 2-game slate with expected a 9.5 point spread, I would think that's, maybe I'm wrong, Alex. I would think that's kind of low.
Yeah, I think Ayuk, he's not like standing out from a projection standpoint for like a few different reasons, like the weather, Deebo Samuel coming back, and obviously McCaffrey being on the team, he gets targets a lot more than the old running backs. So I do feel like Ayuk, he might be a little bit expensive, but it's a 2-game slate and like more than salary. We're just worried about who's going to get the points. So I feel like Ayuk is a reasonable option. He makes a lot of sense if you have Brock Purdy at quarterback to then get Ayuk, because obviously he's as high as anyone else in receiving yardage projected, while other guys like Deebo and McCaffrey they get some fancy points running the ball, which doesn't help your stack. So I think Ayuk, he's fine. I'll mostly play him in my San Francisco stacks, I think.
By the way, is that you running that Odd Shopper sports betting account, Ben, in the chat there about?
What do you think? I'm a magician? No,
first
I can barely
touchdown. Like you're trying to bait me into a first touchdown as Alex is dropping a gem of information here. I mean, come on.
I can barely manage my own YouTube handle, so
Okay.
no, not me.
Yeah.
It's
go. You were going to respond to what Alex was saying. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm in line with that. Certainly, if you have Purdy, you're going to boost up these pass catchers. Because the thing with a guy like Brock Purdy, obviously, if McCaffrey's ripping off receptions for long gains, it helps. But if he's getting peppered for like 3-yard receptions and getting tackled, it helps McCaffrey. It doesn't really help your quarterback unless he's scoring. You more want longer ADOTs and down the field, the guy like Ayuk or Jennings. And then, of course, the one guy we haven't really talked about, which is George Kittle, who's just been on an absurd tear. He's got 7 touchdowns in the last 4 games, and he's going to be a popular target today. It's hard for me. I'm not saying I'm completely fading him, but he's running unsustainably hot with touchdowns right now on moderate target share. So that's a volatile situation. If he gets 5 targets and he doesn't score, it's not going to look the same as the recent weeks.
Yeah, I still think, and this is where I would throw back, and it's a nice little transition into what we're doing with BetMGM that I'll bring up in a second here. But he at plus money still, and I just want to make sure that this hasn't been bet down. I mean, he's still at plus 145. And if you look at what he's been able to do over the last, 4 or 5 games, there's as likely of a chance that he scores 2 as he doesn't score at all. So the fact that he can get 1 from him seems pretty much like, all right, you're locked in there. And again, it's a completely different scenario when you're applying a plus 145 odds versus a cost to him in a DFS standpoint. But is that why you would just move away from him, because of the cost standpoint? Because I feel like, and Alex referenced this on a shorter slate with Ayuk, if you're going to make that work for a guy like Brandon Ayuk, you're certainly going to make this thing work for a guy like Kittle, and maybe pivot to Ingram, but that's pretty much it. Like, I don't know how much you need to pivot away from Kittle tonight or today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's for raw points, and obviously I want to hear what the boss man thinks on that, because
Sure.
I get it. If he finds the end, he could easily be the highest scoring tight end. And if you're not maxing out your salary, if you've got room to play with, it doesn't matter if Ingram has more points per dollar. It's just raw points at that point. So I get it. But I do think, again, using our tools and looking at what we have behind the paywall and whatnot, there are some paths where George Kittle is really, really popular. He's one of the more popular tight ends, and he has a moderate output if he doesn't score in a rainy, windy game potentially. So I could go both ways there. He's not a priority. If I get some, I'd like to, because he's got 2 touchdown upside. I think he's proven that, but not my favorite Niner, that's for sure.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I think Kittle is the guy I'm willing to kind of be under the field a little bit, because I do feel like people are going to expect those touchdowns, and that's really tough to bank on no matter how good the player is. especially in this game where they're probably going to want to run the ball more than throw it. So I feel like spending up for Kittle might be not the best option. It's not a bad option, but like there's not too much differentiating the different guys at tight end to me. So yeah, I think Kittle is the one that my gut's telling me though is going to be higher on than he should be.
All right, before we hit what's happening, what we're doing, this awesome thing happening at BetMGM, and we're going to give away some free months of a subscription here at Stokastic as well. How deep can you get here, right? Because again, when you're talking about, as we mentioned on the Seattle side, nothing changes. There is blowout mode. So, Ben, you going Ray on us, or, like how deep do you want to see? I don't have a bet on anybody in this game outside of Kate. I told you earlier. But, maybe Ray crosses the end zone in some garbage time opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's the parallel of talking about some of those peripheral Seattle guys. To me, if you want to change it up, you don't have to get even crazier than a guy like Eli Mitchell, maybe Jennings, as crazy dart throws. Because Deebo coming back, it's already crowded. They've got McCaffrey, who's going to consolidate a lot. And they want listen, it's the Niners. They're a run-first team, and they're a heavy favorite. So more than likely, if kind of a secondary player is going to get work, it's probably the backup running back more than the fourth-string wide receiver. They might not have to throw the ball a lot today.
Awesome. All right, let's do this. Remind everybody what's happening here with us, BetMGM. This is fantastic, right? We have a link. We have a code, Platinum Sub. Either way, it's going to bring you to the same spot, and you're going to get a risk-free bet up to $1,000, and that's at BetMGM, and 2 months of Stokastic plus Platinum absolutely free. Now, you must be 21 or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So we want you to know this first and foremost. But look, I know just from the Odd Shopper channel, right, where we're heavily focused on sports betting, a lot of you out there are not on BetMGM for whatever reason. It's clunky. You don't like it. It's too difficult. All bullshit, all nonsense, because as soon as you get on there, you'll see how easy it is. And I'm going to give you a gem here, all right? Because Raza can confirm this, Alex. I have found this mine of a bet that seems to pay off exponentially, especially when it comes to primetime games. It's a field goal prop. I'm going to give that out in a second here for you. But let me just tell you how to do this, right? You're going to get $1,000 risk-free on your first bet, and you're going to get 2 months of Stokastic plus Platinum absolutely free. So all you need to do is click the link below, sign up. You're going to get a free Stokastic membership as well using our form. You can click the BetMGM button that appears after you register, after you log in. Signing up at BetMGM is going to take you like 90 seconds max. Really, this is easy. Just deposit $10. That's it, $10. And then immediately, or up to whatever you want. It could be 10 up to $1,000, right? Basically what your first bet will be. So either 10 up to 1,000, whatever you want it to be risk-free. And then I'll make it easy for you. Place it on George Kittle anytime touchdown. That's plus 145. All right. That's a 1450 return right there on a risk-free bet. Chances are George Kittle's going to get a couple of scoring opportunities. Oh, by the way, since you're new to BetMGM, all right, one last thing, fellas, if I may, on the way out. Will each team score one or more field goals in the first half? This bet is paying off like gangbusters on the Discord that we have. And I know it because I've been giving it out on prime time. So there's your gem. There's your risk-free bet. And oh, by the way, we're giving you 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum. All right. You think Lofty's coming with an extra bet, guys? Get out of here.
He doesn't do that. That's why we brought you in. The people needed to tap into your mind. You know, what can I say? So.
It's hit, Alex, it's hit 9 of 10 primetime games. It's hit 10 of our last 12. It's hit like 15 of our last, I have to do the math. I think 15 of our last 18. It is anytime it's dark out, we play this prop. And the beauty of it on BetMGM is that it is always plus money. No matter what, it is always plus money. It's crazy.
Nice, man. You got me interested here.
See? If we have the boss interested, then you know something's going on here. All right. We'll tell you about Noel's advantage coming up here. Let's hit the Chargers game too, though, where we also have, look, a big one with the quarterback. And this is, I think, the first time, because we've talked about everybody but the quarterback for the first 2 games. Now we have Justin Herbert. Now I'm going to save my theory about Justin Herbert because I don't want to ruin Ben's day quite yet, right? Like I'd rather get into the show a little bit deeper here. But I am not, I think I don't like Justin Herbert today. I don't think that you're going to get typical Justin Herbert. I don't really think it has much to do with him as much as my theory with what's surrounding him. But Alex, I mean, look, this is the guy right now when we're talking about where our projections are, where the ownership is for the quarterback spot. He's not the heaviest owned guy by any means, but he is when it comes to quarterback. So are you doing that? Are you buying into that chalk? Are you kind of mitigating a little bit more with Trevor Lawrence now that we can open up this game as well?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Justin Herbert today. For several reasons. I mean, they're the most pass heavy team on the slate, with the base rushing rate being only 37% for the Chargers. It's going to be a competitive game more often than the other one. And then you also have Mike Williams out, which is going to elevate the projection of everyone else. So that makes Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer, and Everett all better plays. And he kind of vaults DeAndre Carter into contention as one of the best values. So like all this is adding up to Justin Herbert being the top QB for me.
The thing about Herbert it's a blessing and a curse in some ways. He doesn't really run. So you know that if he does get there, you need the onslaught. So it makes building a lineup actually pretty easy with him. You take him, you load up with the pass catchers. He doesn't have that out. Now on the flip side, he's not going to get you like random 8 points by running the ball and finding the end zone, barring something ridiculous. So I see it both ways there, but just looking at this, it's a healthy total. He's got numerous playmakers. He should have one more. It's an hour-long show, so I'm not going to get into the Staley rant of what he did last week.
Why? That was my whole narrative.
I can't.
I was going to attack. Go ahead.
I can't. You've
got, wait a second. You've got a coach who is already known, Ben, in the NFL for being an idiot. And he did exactly what people expected him to do, idiot shit. And his star wide receiver or quasi, if you want to count two that he has to throw to, is one of them is out. Come on.
I mean, like I said, this is a guy who doesn't play Herbert in the preseason, which I agree with. And then it's just, all right. And then they lost too. Like they can't even beat the Broncos with the starters. I don't really understand that. Regardless, it does give a boost and it makes it easier to build today because this is a team that had a lot of options to begin with. Boost to Keenan. I mean, Alex already said this, but Allen and Palmer and Everett and even Carter to a lesser extent. Obviously, Eckler's going to be busy. Any of those guys, 2, 3, even 4 of them with Herbert are going to make for really reasonable lineups today. They have a healthy team total. They're a slight favorite. Again, we only have 4 quarterbacks. Maybe on a larger slate, I wouldn't have as much interest, but it's hard not to like Herbert just from that standpoint, given the limitations of some of the other quarterbacks.
Alex, let me ask you though, real quick. What do you think? And I don't need like a 31.8% answer, but in your mind, although you would probably be the best person to give us the closest realistic answer to what this probability would be, but that either Brock Purdy or Geno Smith are truly outplaying Justin Herbert today, because clearly it's a non-zero chance. Like it can happen. But I almost think, like, if you look at it, wouldn't it be Brock Purdy would be the guy that you think would have the better shot just because the guys around him? Now it's just a matter of whether or not they would actually do it. Because if you don't think it's anywhere remotely close to worth that risk, then Ben's right, where you just have to eat this chalk. And you mentioned here earlier, just where we started, that Herbert's a guy you're going to get to. But I was just curious, like how thin or small or narrow that window would be for you.
Yeah, I mean, Purdy and Herbert are both up there for me. Like Purdy, his team's got a better projected score, so that just means more touchdown potential. And he's got great guys throwing into. It's not like we're betting that Purdy is like a superstar. It's just he's got to be an average player on this killer offense, and he can get the job done. Where Herbert is, he's a much better quarterback, but just the touchdown equity isn't quite as high in this one. And yeah, I think that the overall team isn't as strong. So it's a toss up for me, I'd say. But the main thing is I'm leaning towards those two over Trevor Lawrence, because Lawrence, his ownership in our projections is extremely high, 32%. So I just feel like Lawrence would be third in my rankings after Purdy and Herbert, but he's I guess he's a little bit lower on than Herbert, but about the same. So I'm leaning towards Herbert and Purdy here.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, and we can talk a little deeper about that when we hit the Jags, Ben, about where Lawrence is and the projected ownership. Real quick, I had to check it. It's a 40-1 ticket, by the way, Ben, if you wanted to play Brock Purdy, 2 touchdowns, 2 anytime touchdowns today. Just so.
Oh yeah, he's gonna turn into Justin Fields. Sure.
Well, I'm just saying, in case you were interested in that bet, that's all. I'm just letting you know.
Good to know.
40-1.
Good to know.
I shopped around. BetMGM had the best number there.
Great.
Who do you think is the least obvious? Because it's probably not Kelly, right? But who is the least obvious step in and take over that void left from Mike Williams? Because, right, it's going to be Eckler and Allen right there at the top. And clearly Kelly is going to be the guy who, with the expected volume, right? Or Palmer, sorry, not Kelly, Palmer. So I don't know if there's another, if I don't know. I don't know if you would look at maybe Everett as a result of that as a pivot.
I mean, I think Everett certainly in play is going to get a boost. If you want to go deeper, I think on the edges, DeAndre Carter is a guy, he's sub 4K. He definitely is going to be a cheap pay down option. And then I'm going to mirror this to Colby Parkinson. I think there's a world where Parham could be that guy too. You're looking at maybe a couple targets. He's going to have to score, working behind Everett a little bit. So I think we know, as you said, Eytan, Palmer is in, like he's getting major work. We know that. We know Keenan Allen. We know Eckler. We even know Everett to an extent. You've got Carter and you've got Parham as I think pay down options, punt options, not secure volume, but listen, they're out there with Herbert. They make reasonable attachments to that stack.
Parham's an interesting one. I saw him mentioned, that was Nathan, by the way, on a guy on our team baiting me into a first and last touchdown single game parlay ticket with Parham, Alex. But outside of that nonsense, from the betting standpoint, is there anything there, or do you think, is it maybe not worth the risk here? Right? Because some of this determines, or I guess is determined by your opinion on the game flow, which we really didn't talk about as much as we did the first game, where how you see it, how close you see it. This is a much tighter spread. This is a different total. So maybe this is a tighter game in which there isn't as much opportunity for Justin Herbert to go deeper into rotation and guys like even Carter or Parham to make plays.
Well, I think you got usually 4.5. So on average, either 4 or 5 guys running routes on any play. So if we're going down the list, Eckler, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, that's 3. So then it's going to be Carter, Everett, Parham. Those are going to be the other guys kind of rotating in. And Josh Kelly, let's not sleep on. He's been playing a lot too. One of the questions from my perspective is these backup running backs like Josh Kelly and Eli Mitchell, are they going to get phased out in the playoffs? And in my just observation over the years, people maybe think that's more likely to happen than it actually is. And teams tend to take the same rotations into the playoffs. But if you are feeling that way, then McCaffrey and Eckler look like absolute smash plays. I'm not sleeping on these backups as possible GPP options here. But as far as the game, I think you got 43-degree weather, not much wind in Jacksonville today, so a little bit colder than normal, but favorable conditions compared to this time of year in other spots. And these teams have shown a tendency to pass a lot, the Jags in the game versus Titans passed a ton. They barely rushed at all, so they're down in that one. But that just shows that if the Chargers build up a lead, it's going to be a lot of Trevor Lawrence passing attempts. So this one, it seems like it could be a shootout pretty easily, but it's the NFL, so we never really know what's going to happen until the game is played.
Yeah, I'm curious that Alex just brought something up, Ben, and for both of you guys here, if you want to start, and then Alex too, before we kind of wind down on our final team and dive a little deeper with the Jags. How often do you think, and again, it doesn't have to be a specific percentage down to the 10th of a decimal, but building multiple lineups across the board for this wild card 2-game only slate. So I imagine that's going to be more than normal. But how many builds do you think are going to have your both running backs being those top guys with McCaffrey and Eckler?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can do it today because the quarterbacks are pretty lackluster. So you can jam 2 and punt at tight end and even punt at quarterback to a lesser extent. And I think that's fine. And I do think it's a good point, though. Just again, this is more anecdotal than giving you numbers, but like in the NBA, when you get into the playoffs, these guys are on the court more. That's just a fact. But like with the NFL, it's such a physical game. You can't just say like, okay, my running back is not coming off the field. Like they have to spell these guys. And when you have a team, particularly like the Niners, who want to run the ball, there's still plenty to go around. You have a pass first team. Maybe they don't want to run it to begin with. Maybe that backup gets phased out a little bit. But I do think that the backups, particularly these guys that have had a decent role, still will be there, even though it's the playoffs.
Well, maybe we can. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. As far as that same question with the build, do you find yourself getting, just because of the nature of the slate, both Eckler and McCaffrey in the same build?
Yeah, I think it's doable because there's some good value plays running back and wide receiver. It does kind of paint you into a corner where you're spending like most of your salary on these 2 guys, and it's going to be tough to build the rest of your lineup, but certainly doable.
I saw a super chat from our guy Chard here, and appreciate the first one too. So doubling up. Now this is a beauty. I want a Jags running back, but I'm quick to avoid anyone with a name that sounds like an acronym. Forgive my hastiness.
I see what he did there,
sir. Well, look, I mean, this opens up both, or continues the conversation you mentioned about the back of running backs and what you would think or could happen in the playoffs. And clearly there's going to be ETN and there's going to be backup opportunity. So this also depends on game flow, because you mentioned, Alex, if the Chargers are up and if Brandon Staley's not getting in the way of a football game, then the running game for Jacksonville could be phased out to the point where it's just more passing and maybe getting ETN in the passing game. But a guy like Hasty, for example, could be phased out faster.
Yeah, I'm thinking that actually Hasty may get phased out if the Jags have a good day, because it looks like he's getting more of those 3rd down route attempts, and he gets targeted a lot more on those than ETN gets targeted on his routes. So I do think Hasty maybe works better in a game that Jacksonville is trailing, but he's kind of like a deep sleeper that I'm going to take some shots on. I mean, you got some outs where if ETN gets injured, Hasty is definitely going to be the guy. Same could be said about Eli Mitchell and Joshua Kelly. So that happens a significant amount of time. That's like 5% of the time the running back position gets injured during the game. So in a very large tournament, those are the kind of odds you can take a shot on.
All right, let's look a little deeper in this squad, though. We have to remind everybody as more eyes are upon us. Couple of quick things: thumbs up, subscribe. Both of those buttons are there for you. They're very easy to hit. You don't even need to change your window or do anything different from your viewing habits. And also a reminder about our deposit match with No House Advantage. This is super easy. Like, we have free projections for you. Alex and the team have free projections for you on site. We even have our optimal lineups on Stokastic. So this is really cool for you, where you can have anything as far as like what to play down to right through optimal lineups, to every single thing, to where you don't even need to do anything but like hit a couple of buttons and you can still win money. So we have it all for you. All stages of activity we have for you at No House Advantage. You can get up to the house, 21x times the house. So you have that option too. NHA is expanding. It's not just the contest that they have. So you can really do a couple of different things and money-making things at No House Advantage. We want to start you off. We'll match your first deposit. It used to be 50. Now it's 100. And all you need to do is use our promo code Stokastic, right? Easy stuff. Easy stuff. All right. Trevor Lawrence seems to be the easiest fade when it comes to quarterbacks, right? Like, of all that we've talked about here, and some of it is just getting to Geno because other people are going to get to Purdy to fade Trevor Lawrence and ultimately Justin Herbert, right? It's like the fade train. It's trickle down fading here. But I mean, Trevor Lawrence, it sounds like from both you guys, is going to be the guy that you get to maybe the least. Ben?
So I don't know about the least for me, just because I still think that my problem with, let me frame this right. The problem with Trevor Lawrence is not that I don't like the play. It's that I think he's going to be over-owned relative to his chance of success. So it makes it tricky. It's not that I think he has no chance to succeed. He sucks, anything like that. I just think that for me, there's a bigger gap to a guy like Herbert than our projections and our ownership are showing that the field might think. And Lawrence, I mean, he did not play great against Tennessee, and he certainly didn't play great against Houston. And who knows if it's the foot, who knows what's going on. He should be good to go, but I'm okay. He's got a lot of options. That makes it easier with Kirk and Zay Jones, and certainly Eytan can catch the ball. But you're going to need a healthy amount of Trevor Lawrence if you want to get leverage, and that is by far my biggest concern. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get over the field just given how popular he might be.
You think the same, Alex? Something similar?
Yeah, essentially it's a game theory kind of move because Zay Jones is going to be super popular. Evan Ingram is the top owned at his position. So a lot of people are going to be on Lawrence as a result of the pass catchers being popular. So I think I do have a little bit more confidence in the Chargers just throwing the ball more. And then the 49ers putting on more points. So this is why Lawrence is kind of coming in third for me.
Yeah, I mean, where else can you really go here? You talked about Hasty and as far as in the passing game and hoping that they're down and that you could use him in third down scenarios here. But I can't even imagine what type of scenario you would need to be in where Jamal Agnew is saving your day, right?
Well, he has a crazy target share. He's been targeted 32% of the time he's been on the field. Jamal Agnew has, but he just doesn't play much. So he's a guy that I think you could do in a Millie Maker lineup, but that's just a dart throw.
But is that Ben? I know. Let me just further this though. Like, are you basically, it sounds like maybe it's just because of circumstance and we're talking about a 2-game slate, and in the 2-game slate, half of the slate is Geno Smith and Brock Purdy at the quarterback spot. So all of these circumstances are kind of working together in this isolated incident, but it kind of feels like you either are eating significant chalk with Jacksonville or you're throwing a dart with Hasty and Agnew. Like, it doesn't seem like there's much middle ground here.
I mean, you can, if you don't get to Lawrence, I still think it's more than reasonable, particularly if you're stacking up Herbert, and a lot of people are going to do that. You're probably going to get in some ETN or Kirk as the quote unquote run back / you're just stacking up the most popular game. I mean, we only have 2 games and this is just the better game. Everybody can see that. So I get that. I mean, are there Jags players that might be on the field just a handful of times that can make an impact? For sure. And that's probably Agnew and Hasty to some extent. But for me, you have guys like Marvin Jones. You've got guys like Zay Jones. They're reasonable options and they're much higher chance of success. So, and then you've got Evan Ingram, who's going to be in contention for the most popular tight end. And so a lot of relevancy, even for a Jaguars team, if you don't like Lawrence.
Not Snoop Connor, huh?
No, not Snoop Connor.
Okay.
Old Miss Great.
Agnew, man, we're getting some love in the chat. It's going to break the slate. I'm telling you, anytime TD on BetMGM it's dipping. Somebody out there put a lot of money on Jamal Agnew since I brought him up with Alex. All right. And I want to know who, because BetMGM just dropped him 50 points. All right. Super chat in here. Look, I already bet Parham after Ben was going on and on and on. Vinny C, how do you suggest? All right, let's look at this, because I know we're not talking about this specifically as far as names, and we're not bringing up the other games, but you damn right, Stokastic. I am sniffing that ladder there. But let's look at this, the Saturday, Sunday, and the Saturday, Monday slates. Just kind of talk about strategy from that standpoint, instead of talking about the individual names and teams that we have throughout the rest of the slate. But it is an opportunity for both of you guys to open up a little bit on just general strategy, because we're not going to have the opportunity to talk tomorrow and Monday retro about what happened on Saturday. So Alex, does that make sense? Just kind of any general strategy that you would apply that may be a little different, knowing that it's also the wild card.
Yeah, I mean, we got some ownership up for that game, so make sure to check the numbers there. I don't have like a ton of thoughts about it. I guess these first two games, like I wouldn't go overboard on them because people tend to just be a little bit more biased to the games happening the day of the slate. But some of the best plays this week aren't gonna be playing until tomorrow. So the New York Giants versus Minnesota game in a dome, that's going to be a great one to stack. You know, Buffalo, you can't really fade them, and then Dallas, Tampa Bay, that could be a shootout for sure. So maybe just a game stacking one of these, and you know, like just following the projections ownership. That it's not that much different than normal slate, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you got a lot more flexibility. Like you've got 6 games, 12 quarterback. There's all sorts of things that you can do. I will say we had plenty of shows throughout the week that talked a little more Saturday, Monday, my first look show with Lofty.
Yep.
Talked just that. So you can always check those out as well. But yeah, for me, Alex summed it up. I remember when Thursday, Monday slates used to be a lot more popular. Like everyone would play people on the Thursday game. And it like you always, the first games tend to be over-owned. So if you're playing Saturday, Monday, I'm not saying don't play anyone from these games, but I'd try to, certainly ease back and target the games, particularly tomorrow. I really like that Giants Vikings game, and you've got the Bills as a 14-point home favorite. So there are plenty of plays. You don't need to force in some of the guys we've talked about on a 2-game slate for a 6-game slate.
Yeah, I like the comparison, what we saw with Thursday night, and we have limited sample sizes, but still end of the year regular seasons on Saturday. So it is somewhat of a shorter week in the sense of even if it's a day. And look, how many games do all of us need to collectively watch, right, in order to come to the easy conclusion, which is these guys are human beings, they're creatures of habit. And when they get disrupted, it's the same thing when we ask Ben to do a video like 40 minutes earlier in the morning. It's like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? Like, come on, right? You play a day earlier, it screws you up. That's all. No, you don't curse. I'm sorry.
I don't. I mean, I do off air, but not on the show.
No, never on here. Never on here. I can't believe neither one of you guys think Brandon Staley's going to screw this thing up to high hell and back.
I mean, it's not impossible. I love the talent of the Chargers. And I will say, we got a couple questions about this and we didn't really get to it because I don't think there's a lot to say. Defense today, you can have any of them and I would feel pretty comfortable, from paying down with Seattle or going up to San Francisco. Certainly the Chargers can get after Lawrence. I'm not making a big stand at defense. Shout out to our man, Jorge.
Wow, this is huge, Jorge.
Look at this guy.
20 gifted memberships by Jorge.
Man of the people.
I mean, he is the people.
Yeah.
Seriously. Holy shit. Thank you. It's a hell of a way to get votes. For whatever you're running for, you got my vote.
Yeah, shout out to Jorge.
Come on, we got to get some likes for that alone. My God, Jorge. Beautiful.
As far as defense, yep. I agree with Ben, or you can kind of just pick any of them and it makes sense. The one thing I'm thinking with defense is if I'm playing the 49ers defense, that's more expensive. So I'm actually hoping they go off and have a big game, and I'm most likely to play Seattle players versus the 49ers defense. Where if I'm picking one of the other game defenses, like they could just have an average score and be the highest scoring. So I'd be much more likely to make a game theory move and play an offensive player versus the defense, because not many people are going to lean against that.
So that's, again, just due to circumstance here, because you really can't get around that so much. But you're not, like, just to go a little further on that, a little deeper, I guess, on that, Alex, to what extent are you playing offense versus defense, right? Because you're not going to go McCaffrey versus Seattle's defense to that extent. Or would you?
I do have some lineups like that.
Okay, okay, good. That's why I asked.
Yeah, but mostly because, the Seahawks are the cheapest defense, so they don't have to have a huge score to be in the winning lineup. So that's kind of how I'm playing it, where if I'm picking Seattle's defense, I'm just hoping they put up, like 5 points, 6 points. And then the money savings plus the other defenses underperforming gets you there. So the main thing is the 49ers. I'm probably not going to play something like Kenneth Walker versus the 49ers defense, because like if you're picking the 49ers defense, they actually have to excel today compared to the other ones.
All right. I'm curious, both of you guys, and we'll hit anything that was there a name or somebody that you had circled that you thought was either worth coming back to or maybe going on that we didn't just hit enough on? It's tough with this 2 games. I mean, we even hit Ray. So
yeah, if you do that, I think we checked all the boxes. No, I really think on a slate like this, one of the first things I said, you have to balance kind of raw points and just ownership against, okay, where do I want to be different and ways to be different. You can leave a lot of money on the table. That opens it up. You can take a player who doesn't play a lot, someone who's not on the field a lot, and hope that they luck box on our couple touches. Or the third way is you do something within your lineup that's a weird combination. You don't use a team. You have your defense stacked against maybe your quarterback, and you hope the game he throws a pick 6 and then he has to throw even more. Something like very, very bizarre that you would never do on a full slate. There's a lot of ways to be different. You don't have to reach for a player. You don't have to leave 5,000 on the table. Sometimes it's just as simple as, okay, I'm going to have a weird stack, and if I hit it and something bizarre happens, I'm actually boxing out a lot of other people.
what do you think, Alex? Anything, anybody or anything like that on the way out? Another gem? We can just get the hell out of here. I think Neil's wearing the same shirt from the last 2 days. He tweeted. Ehrenberg's up with him, so.
I'd say don't be afraid to stack up 3 or 4 players with the QB. Like, you don't need like every single player to like go out and overproduce in a 2-game slate. A lot of times you just get them and they hit their projection, and that's good enough. So obviously one team is going to throw for the most yards. So like, yeah, that quarterback's probably going to be in the winning lineup, and he can carry like some players who even just perform average to the winning lineup.
A little shot there for Jusic touchdown there. Now I'm not playing him. That was Greg SJ1. That was our good friend of the program there. Greg SJ1 slided that in there, Ben. Don't put that on me. Okay. All right. Don't put that one on me. I'm not playing Kyle this week. All right.
Fair enough.
I mean, Kyle Juszczyk is a tough fade in the playoffs, but maybe more of a showdown guy.
There you go. All right, everybody. We appreciate. Don't go anywhere. All right. Live Before Locks coming your way right now. As I mentioned, Neil is on like a 3-day bender of the same shirt. Greg Ehrenberg is with them. So you want to make sure that you're there for the 2 of them. Tyler's not going anywhere. Like you aren't going anywhere. If you haven't hit the thumbs up button, then you freeloaded the last hour, and shame on you. You can still change and rectify that right now. You should subscribe across the board. Look, we gave you that George Kittle anytime plus 145 touchdown at BetMGM. Sign up. It'll take you 90 seconds. You'll get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum as well. And you're going to get a risk-free bet to use on that George Kittle touchdown. So when it hits and you're $14.50 richer, I won't even ask for a cent. All right. Not a cent. Fellas, it was a pleasure. All right. We wish everybody out there the best, and hopefully they can make some money. And I'm sure they will, listening to both of you.
Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
From the holidays, happy New Year's, everyone, and a very happy New Year's to everyone that's about to get inducted into the Hall of Fame here and get their free month of Stokastic plus Platinum, $120 value. You want to get involved? You want to get up here, inducted into the Hall of Fame, have us do all the bragging for you, and get a free month of Stokastic plus Platinum? Easy. All you do, go to stokastic.com/avatar. Download the profile picture. Use it wherever you play. Then tweet your wins at Stokastic HOF on Twitter. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Boom. Free month of Stokastic plus Platinum. You're in, and you're getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Or you can come on back and we'll do it again. Let's see who we got on the board this week. Some huge winners. First up, that stunner. This guy just crushes all the time. actually tweeted from our handle. Great call by Ty Schmidt using the boomer bust tool to identify Donovan Mitchell as a strong option in NBA last night. Looks like a lot of people listened. Yeah, 100K first, second, 30K, third, 10K, fifth, 3K. And then a Stokastic avatar sitting right there. Wicked Mumbles in fourth place as well. Follow that up with the 4-point play. You got that stunner at 15K and Wicked Mumbles second with 6250. Big night for those two fellas rocking the Stokastic and the old school Awesemo avatar as well. Logan Grew. Luca is a god, just like the guys behind the Stokastic projections. Also, shout out to the analysis. Great analysis from the best today. Thanks, guys. $20,000 win to Logan Grew. Rocking the new Stokastic avatar. Looks good, man. Congratulations. And then Scott Vetter. Very simple man. At Stokastic HOF. $15,000 win in the $150,000 fair catch. Followed up by Wayne Hoggs. How about Wayne? 10,000 third place. Took down my first NBA top 3. I'll snag that free membership indeed. Laffy, ship my money. Thanks for all you boys do. No, man, thanks to you. Appreciate it and congratulations. And then Lord Malachi. Been watching content since 2020 bubble season. Picked up a PGA, MMA, NASCAR win, along with MLB, NBA, and NFL. Appreciate you guys a ton for what you do. Mama, I'm in the Hall of Fame. You've now been inducted, brother. And how about this from Lord Malachi? What a sweet thought here. Special shout out to my guy, Josh Engelman. Positive energy and thoughts your way. Josh is back, baby. Josh Engelman's back in the house. Colin Crampton, not a top 3, but hopefully still Hall of Fame worthy. Huge night thanks to the rare Awesemo DFS sighting on NBA Live before Lock A, who's with us on Friday night. And I'm glad to see that helped out old Plubert here with a $10,000 win. We got a lot today. Zach McMurray, what a way to start out the new year. Binks in 2 different contests. Shout out to the boys over at Stokastic. Best advice and tools in the DFS industry. Thanks, man, and congrats. 3,000, 3,500 in the shot. And then in the 2 different Sunday shots. Love to see it. Juan. How about Juan? Sorry, a few days late. Didn't know you were giving out free memberships. Yes, we are. Just got to meet the requirements and rock that avatar like you're doing. You guys are the best. He says $1,000. Little 4-check hockey action. Congrats, Juan. And then can't say that name up top. We'll go to Hugo Seth, 68, because that would be uncomfortable. $1,000 win here in the 15K single back. Shout out to Stokastic and the YouTube squad for turning my Washington into a Cleveland. I even made a Twitter for you folks. Congrats, man. Next up, you got Jerry. All right, Jerry, popped my NBA cherry last night. Super proud DFS moment. Thanks for all the awesome daily content. $1,000 in the mini max. Love it. First place to Jerry and Eric Johnston. Great resources as always. $875 going to him in the Friday windmill. A few more here before we wrap it up. You got Sammy Z. Shout out to Stokastic for the win. $500 victory there. Congrats, brother. And then Olamar. Looking forward to that free premium month to take my game to the next level. That's why we do it, dude. Appreciate the team for all the provided insight to make us better players. 400, 250, first, second, and fifth in the piggy bank. Man, those are difficult to get that high. Huge fields. Congrats, man. And Melissa, over on Prize Picks. You know all about Prize Picks. An incredibly nice way to end 2022. Thanks for the projection, Stokastic. Use the $20 risk-free bet. Beautiful. Melissa closes it out. Appreciate you guys hanging with us. Welcome to everyone who's inducted into the Hall of Fame for the first time. Welcome back if you've been here before. Remember, go to stokastic.com/avatar. Down that. Use it wherever you play. Tweet your wins at Stokastic HOF and get a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you win.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Stokastic NFL Live Before Lock Show. NFL playoffs, they're here. We've got 2 games today. We got 3 games tomorrow. We've got a game on Monday as well. I'm joined by Neil. Usually on Saturdays, Neil and I do our tournament strategy show. We break down the Sunday main slate, but that kind of goes out the window this time of year. We've got playoffs to talk about, and we are starting with the couple of games that we have on today's slate. And potentially, by the way, we're going to be doing some FanDuel overlay updates because at least at the time that we were starting this show, the main contest on FanDuel only about half full. It looks like there's going to be a lot of overlay. So I am currently updating some lineups to update on FanDuel as well, but wanted to make sure I bring you guys all of the best plus EV information. And sometimes it's just shouting out there's overlay on FanDuel. Another place where there's pretty typically overlay, No House Advantage, the sponsor of today's show. And if you sign up at NHA for the first time, get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit when you sign up using our link. But in addition, they have props that you can play against the house. It's brand new over at No House Advantage. So go check that out, because if you're in a state that doesn't have legal sports betting, there's a good chance you could play props against the house still over at NHA. Just make sure when you sign up, you use our link. So with all that aside, Neil, how are you doing? Are you excited for the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the playoffs. I'm not going to talk about anything related to best ball. I'm just going to avoid talking about best ball, but some people might have some sweats there, and playoff best ball could be fun. Damn it, I didn't succeed in not mentioning best ball. I'm excited for the playoffs. We no longer have season long, but there are so many different types of contests you can play in the playoffs. I actually wrote up a couple types of contests that I am interested in playing. One of them being flash drafts. Have you ever played flash drafts, Greg?
So you know what's weird is, for whatever reason, we could do everything in New Jersey, right? Drugs, you could do them. Sports betting, you could do them. I think they let you drive here if you're like 12 or something like that. I can't do flash drafts, though. They're, for whatever reason, not authorized by New Jersey. Could not tell you why.
That is really strange. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a single reason why you wouldn't be able to do flash drafts. It's a different type of contest, but very fun. If you have not yet played flash drafts, highly recommend them to people. Go check out the article that I posted on the Stokastic website a couple days ago.
And by the way, I understand that there are apparently display issues that are happening on FanDuel. That aside, though, it still does look like there's overlay.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how much overlay at this point, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a guess because, yeah, once again, there's some sorts of issues with FanDuel, but apparently it's also preventing some people from joining. But Neil and I were going to be breaking down all the best plays for the slate, for FanDuel, for DraftKings, and how we're going to handle a 2-game slate and a playoff one. And I want to ask you, does anything change for you for the playoffs as opposed to the regular season for NFL? I know that it being a 2-game slate is a little bit different, but in terms of how the games are played, maybe how you're looking for value, is there anything inherently different about playoff games compared to regular season?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say other than the 2-game slate, you can count on teams playing their studs a little bit more. So like you're probably going to get less run from backup running backs. Other than that, honestly, I can't think of all that much that changes outside of the, it's a 2-game slate versus a 12-game slate. That's the bigger factor for me. But in terms of like a 2-game regular season slate versus a playoff slate, I think it's just probably teams generally are going to play their studs a little bit more in the playoffs. But I can't really think of a concrete example in this game. Like maybe Travis Etienne gets more run at the expense of JaMychal Hasty in the night game. I guess maybe Austin Eckler is fully like he's been playing sometimes like 60% of snaps. I guess those are the concrete examples that I can't think. Austin Eckler might get a little bit more run. You might not see quite as much Joshua Kelly. But yeah, in general, not a whole lot different. Is there anything that stands out to you in playoffs versus regular season other than the obviously size of the slate?
Yeah. So if we had a 2-game slate in the regular season, like let's say somebody's playing the primetime slate and it's the Sunday night football game, the Monday night football game. So it's still 2 games. I think it's easier to take shots on people in regular season games. It becomes a little bit more difficult in the playoffs, just from the standpoint of, like, is Christian McCaffrey going to be coming off the field as much in the playoffs as he was in the regular season? Probably not. You mentioned before ETN. JaMychal Hasty, it stands to reason he's not going to play as much as he did towards the tail end of the regular season. In fact, I think it's pretty reasonable to say the reason that JaMychal Hasty played more in the last few games was because the Jaguars were trying to make sure that ETN was healthy, ramped up and ready to go for the playoffs. So I think that some of the usage in terms of snaps, the amount of targets and stuff like that we saw from players towards the end of the year, particularly for playoff teams, I kind of think we have to take it with a grain of salt as we come into the playoffs and just expect teams to really lean on their studs more.
Yep. So I think we're on the same page there. We're just kind of expecting, which makes it a little bit harder to make lineups because obviously the studs cost more. Oftentimes we can mix in these kind of cheaper guys, backups, that kind of stuff in two team contests in the regular season. It's a little bit harder to do so here. There's still some spots that I like for relatively cheap players who I still think will get some run, and we'll talk about that as we go.
Yeah, so let's start by talking about, and by the way that that we're going to be going through this show, just because we had the deep dive before us, so they went game by game. So here, we're going to run this a little bit more like the way we do the tournament strategy show, where I know that it's still only 2 games, but that aside, we're going to look at all the quarterbacks together, the running backs together, the wide receivers, tight ends, and then at the end we'll still look at some of our favorite ways to stack up the slate. If you guys have any questions, throw them into the Discord channel. We'll be answering those. And then any questions you guys have in YouTube, we'll be hitting on those as we go along as well. And shout out to Jorge, who just gifted out 20 YouTube memberships, people in YouTube. So
he's still never given me one. All this time, I've been waiting for Jorge to give me a membership. I still don't have a Stokastic membership.
Hey, he's waiting for a wrench from you, maybe.
That's a good trade. I'll try and see if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah, he wants to figure out how to kick people out of the YouTube chat and whatnot. But let's start by talking about the quarterbacks. And I think we could talk about DraftKings and FanDuel, separately as we go through, with only being a 2-game slate, and the fact that I just said that some overlay on FanDuel. And by the way, Neil, based on what we were talking about before, I'm now seeing display error. There's the message top FanDuel, but now I'm also seeing where it's saying there's 180,000 entries in the, but either way, that would still be overlay. Maybe not as much overlay as I thought there was before, but still seems like there's going to be some overlay on FanDuel. But let's talk about the quarterbacks. And, we've got 2 teams that have top stack odds that really dwarf the other teams. So we've got the Jaguars, 34% top stack odds on FanDuel. We've got the Chargers at 30%. And then if you look at the DraftKings top stack odds, 45% for the Chargers, 26% for the Jaguars. So how highly are you going to be prioritizing the Jaguars-Chargers game relative to the 49ers and Seattle game?
That's a very good question. I set my cap at 30% on quarterbacks, which is pretty low. So that means that I'm going to be under the field on Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence slightly. I'm going to be over the field on Brock Purdy, and I'm going to get about 10% of Geno Smith. I don't know. It was kind of a hard decision point for me here today because, as you said, Justin Herbert, we projected him for 36% ownership, 36% chance of being optimal. Not really any kind of leverage to be had there. Brock Purdy actually looking a little bit under-owned at 23% ownership, 25% optimal. So gaining a little bit of leverage by playing some Brock Purdy, but in general, I'm really spread out at quarterback because I kind of think, though, basically every quarterback on this slate is interesting to me because Justin Herbert, obviously the likeliest to put up a big score. He's also the most expensive. It also wouldn't surprise me if Justin Herbert gets even more ownership than we're currently projecting him for. Trevor Lawrence, looks neutral in the tools. I'm really struggling with taking any kind of major stands on quarterbacks, which honestly, I'm not really big on taking stands anyway. And I kind of like to spread out my quarterback ownership in part because it just leads to different builds. Like if you stack different teams, you naturally get different builds. So I'm taking that approach here. I'm not really taking a stand. There are some slates occasionally where I might lock in one quarterback and just play one quarterback. But on this one, honestly, I'm spreading it out. I think there are merits to every quarterback on the slate. How about you? Do you have more interest in any quarterbacks relative to others?
Yes, and it's site dependent. So if you look at our top stacks tool for DraftKings, and by the way, if anybody's looking at this and you're going to the top stacks tool, because these slates are just way different than other slates we have, where normally if you go to the top stacks tool, just here are all the quarterbacks for DraftKings, here they are for FanDuel. We have another tab, which is DK Saturday, and then a FanDuel Saturday one, because, we've got the 2 slates that are split up. So if somebody wanted to build lineups for Sunday, they could still do that by looking at this, and or if they just want to do for Saturday. So if we look at DraftKings, we do have the top stack odds for the Chargers at 45% on DK compared to 36% ownership for Justin Herbert. So at least for DK purposes, it looks like Herbert is the most underutilized quarterback relative to our top stack odds. But now on FanDuel, we have Trevor Lawrence projected for 27% ownership with 34% top stack odds going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So when I'm looking at FanDuel, I'm going to be prioritizing Trevor Lawrence. If I'm looking at DraftKings, I prioritize Justin Herbert. And then kind of what's funny about that is then, according to some of the data, FanDuel, I want to be underweight to Justin Herbert, whereas he's one of the most undervalued quarterbacks on DraftKings relative to the top stacks tool. And then I want to be underweight to Trevor Lawrence on DraftKings, whereas he's my favorite quarterback on FanDuel. So it's just kind of funny how ownership kind of dictates that, where my favorite quarterback relative to ownership, just to summarize here, for FanDuel is Trevor Lawrence, and he's maybe my least favorite on DraftKings because of how popular he is. And then on DraftKings, my favorite is Herbert, and maybe my least favorite on FanDuel. Just the way the ownership works.
I mean, that's how we play, right? That's I consider myself an exploitative DFS player. Sounds like you're playing exploitatively as well. That's just, you need to factor in ownership relative to odds of success, and the ownership is going to dictate what we do. I want to correct myself because I was reading off the boom bust tool, not the top stacks tool. So I just gave some information that was incorrect. So we actually have Justin Herbert, the Chargers being the top stack on DraftKings, 45%. So we actually do have positive leverage on Justin Herbert in the stack. Is in terms of optimal odds, he's neutral, but in terms of top stack odds, the Chargers, we actually have positive leverage there, and then negative leverage for both Jacksonville and the Niners, and then a little bit of positive leverage on Geno. I don't think it's enough that it's going to change what I'm doing here, but if it were, I would certainly have more interest in Justin Herbert. He would be my top quarterback if I were just playing one on DraftKings.
Yeah, so that's the way I'm looking at it. And once again, quarterback, as much as it is important for, it's funny, quarterback's probably the most important for real life, least important for fantasy because it's so dependent on what some of the pass catchers do and touchdowns and whatnot. So I view quarterback as being somewhat unimportant for this slate, but just relative to ownership, that's kind of where I'm standing with these guys. But is there anything else you want to mention when it comes to the quarterbacks here?
So I'm in my rules that I'm setting and I'm just doing this for every quarterback, which you could get more nuance with it. You probably, if you have the time, you should. I kind of built quickly, but I'm doing stacking my quarterbacks with at least 2 of running back, wide receiver, or tight end from the same team. So I'm including running backs. Obviously, there are some teams where that works better than others, not quite as well with Jacksonville, for example, works great for San Francisco and the Chargers. But I am including running backs in my double stacks with quarterbacks in my lineups today. And I'm also only playing on DraftKings, so I should say that.
I would have only been playing on DraftKings if it wasn't for overlay popping up on FanDuel. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I would like to get a piece of that. So that's something that is having me build FanDuel lineups as we go as well. Now we got a question from Lippy in our Discord channel. He wants to know, are there any backup QBs worth playing? I'm considering some Josh Johnson lineups. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Save your money. We've only got 4 quarterbacks to choose from, and I understand that if you're looking, actually, I don't even know what case here. I don't even know. I would be interested to hear why you want to play Josh Johnson, but the answer is don't do it.
Yep. Oh, we just got news. Brock Purdy to remain 49ers starter if Jimmy Garoppolo returns this postseason. That's interesting to me. Probably not interesting to people who only care about TFS.
It matters. It shows you the level of confidence they have in Brock Purdy if you're considering playing Josh Johnson today.
That's a good point. Yeah. I would definitely not consider playing Josh Johnson. Even on Showdown, I'm not playing Josh Johnson. You can make a case for it because there's Brock Purdy could get hurt. Like there are people who are there backup QB truthers on Showdown, but on a 2-game slate, there's just really no need to do it.
By the way, people in chat, they want him to play Brock Purdy. They want him to play Josh Johnson instead of Brock Purdy. They want to be paying some rake, but just don't do it. There's no need today. Even for Showdown where it works out from time to time, I still don't really think it's something that you want to be doing. So I think that you should not play Josh Johnson today, and I feel pretty strong about that. Now let's move on to the running backs. And, for a 2-game slate, we've got some running backs to pay up for. The 2 guys who are at the top of the pricing tier, this goes for both FanDuel and DraftKings. We've got Christian McCaffrey at the top. We've got Austin Eckler. If you're paying up for one running back today, which of the 2 are you prioritizing? Run CMC, or are you looking at Eckler? Yeah,
it's run CMC for me. More expensive, but you can fit him in. There's a lot of cheap wide receivers on the slate. Really, we're pretty thin at running back here. I mean, I guess it's a 2-game slate, so that's going to happen. But really, McCaffrey and Eckler really stand out. ETN to some extent as well. And then it's hard to want to play Kenneth Walker, and maybe I overvalue the matchup a little bit. It's just, man, the 49ers are hard to score on. So yeah, I would say, I guess you only asked me about the 2. Yeah, it's McCaffrey is my favorite. He looks great in the boom bust, 60% projected ownership, 68% chance of being optimal. We've got positive leverage on McCaffrey, slight negative leverage on Eckler with 59% projected ownership, 54% chance of being optimal. I will say, so as we were talking about earlier, there is a chance that Eckler just gets more run here than he has been getting. And that might factor into our numbers a little bit. I mean, I don't know what the input is here, but it could be that Austin Eckler gets, more carries, more just on the field, more targets than we have been getting. And of course, he's very involved anyway. So it is close for me. It's a slight lean for McCaffrey. How about you?
Yeah, I like McCaffrey. And by the way, something else I want to point out, because I think this is a relevant point that somebody brought up in the YouTube chat, but it's also something that kind of goes to what I talked about in the intro, the difference between playoff football and regular season football. So we saw, who mentioned it in here? Oh, here we go. Brian Durke says Eckler ain't sharing touches like CMC. I totally agree with that for the regular season.
I do too.
Postseason, though, I think it's different. I think the reason they tried to limit McCaffrey down the stretch of the regular season was just to make sure that he's ready to go for this week and for the playoff run. We're not going to see Eli Mitchell get more carries than Christian McCaffrey now, which is something we saw happen towards the tail end of the regular season. I wouldn't put too much stock into those last few games of the regular season. I think McCaffrey gets all the workload he could handle unless the game's a blowout, which, I mean, it's a possibility because they are favored by, nearly 10 points in this spot. But as long as the game's competitive, McCaffrey is going to get a ton of touches today. And if you look at some of the ownership, McCaffrey 60%, Eckler 60%. That's for DraftKings. For FanDuel, 48% for McCaffrey, 47% for Eckler. So there's no real ownership difference between the two. And I'm just kind of looking at it like, okay, McCaffrey a little bit more expensive, but I think it's worthwhile. That's my lean there. It's not to say that you can't play Eckler, because I don't think that's the case either. In fact, I think if you could find enough value, play Eckler and McCaffrey. But I know a lot of people are going to be building lineups, and you're only going to have cap space for one of them. And that's where I go towards McCaffrey.
So I don't know that I 100% that I'm as sold as you are on McCaffrey getting he's going to get the bulk of the role. So I agree with you at least that I think that McCaffrey is probably going to get more of the load than he did late in the regular season, where Eli Mitchell was literally just splitting carries with him. So I agree with you there. I do think that Eli Mitchell is still going to be involved. I think he's a good enough running back that they don't just want to cut him out. So I think that it's, I would say that it's, for me, I'm more confident that Eli Mitchell will still get some action in this game. And I actually have some interest in Eli Mitchell. I'm more confident in that than a Josh Kelly. Or do you agree with that? At least that Eli Mitchell probably more likely to be involved than somebody like Joshua Kelly or DJ Dallas, for example?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I do think that that's probably the case. But at the same time too, McCaffrey got 10 carries last week, right? He's not going to get 10 carries again. That was just something, it was towards the tail end of the season, and they were just, easing up on his workload. If you look at the last 3 games, there was a total of 44 carries for McCaffrey the last 3 games. And then we got 19 for Eli Mitchell. So for every 2 carries McCaffrey got, Mitchell got 1. I'll expect that to be more for every 5 rushing attempts the 49ers have today, probably 4 goes to McCaffrey and 1 goes to Mitchell, as opposed to it being a 2-to-1 split, something like that.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. I might give more than 1 in 5 to Mitchell. I think that I probably would give more than 1 in 5, maybe more 1 in 4, between 3 and 4, probably my guess. But I mean, we don't really know. We haven't seen this team play in the playoffs, so I think that we're both just speculating at this point. But I do think that Eli Mitchell is a talented enough back that there's a good chance that he still does have a pretty significant role, although obviously not going to be as involved as McCaffrey.
Yeah, and then not to go back too far, but then if you start to look at some of the other games from Eli Mitchell early in the year, it was prior to Christian McCaffrey and whatnot. But let's talk about some of the other running backs. Those are the pay up options that we have. We've got Christian McCaffrey and we've got Austin Eckler. If we're looking to the next tier of running backs, we've got Travis Etienne, we've got Kenneth Walker, and I kind of think that's an island of guys who are priced by themselves, right? Then you're going into the backup type running back scenarios. But between Etienne and Walker, do you have a preference between the next tier of RBs?
Yeah, it's interesting because in a vacuum, not considering ownership, it's obviously got to be Etienne. It's just a much better matchup for Etienne. The Chargers are 29th in terms of rush DVOA. The Niners are 2nd in terms of rush DVOA. So if you have to choose one, for me, it's pretty easily Travis Etienne, just because the matchup is so much better. But then when you factor in ownership, it gets a little bit closer. It's still Etienne for me. We have positive leverage on both these guys, but I think that I still lean Etienne here. We've got him projected for 45% ownership, 51% chance of being optimal. We have Kenneth Walker, 26% ownership, 27% chance of being optimal. So I was kind of surprised to see a 27% chance of Kenneth Walker being optimal, but I do think that I tend to overrate matchups a little bit sometimes. And, the Niners are scared of him. It's how can I play Kenneth Walker against the Niners? He's going to be rushing 2 yards per carry, but that's not real life. That's more like what I picture happening. And then real life, oftentimes, even in really bad matchups, a good running back. And I do think that Kenneth Walker is a very good running back. He can still have success here. So it makes sense that we have some positive leverage there on a starting running back who's going to be getting the bulk of the carries, who's, the lowest owned of the group. But it still is ETN is my preference here. How about you?
Yeah, it's going to be him for me as well. And still the matchup matters, right? So two parts of this matter. Number one, I think ETN is more pass catching upside. And then I also think he just has the considerably better matchup. He's in a game that's expected to be higher scoring. And the 49ers defense is just a massive pain in the ass for opposing running backs. That in the game's expected to be lower scoring, just negative game script. Everything is working against Kenneth Walker, whereas we don't really have the same concerns with ETN. So in that tier of running back, if people are choosing between, I'm going to lean towards ETN. He's a little bit more popular, but I also think it's justified. When I ran lineups before, I was a little bit underweight to Kenneth Walker before the show, came out a little bit overweight to Travis Etienne. So I think that does make sense to lean to ETN if you guys are hand building and choosing between the two. Now, as we start to look at some of the backup running backs, I do agree with you. I think if we had to roster one backup, Eli Mitchell is the one that makes the most sense. I don't have a ton of interest in Joshua Kelly. I don't have a ton of interest in JaMychal Hasty. But is there another backup running back that you think is a good player to look at in large field tournaments?
Yeah. So as you said, Eli Mitchell, I'm actually going to be playing kind of a significant amount of Eli Mitchell. So I'll say that right off the bat. But then of the others, I don't think that I'm playing any Joshua Kelly or DJ Dallas. It's like DJ Dallas is the cheapest of the bunch. So, he allows you to get to some plays maybe that the others don't, some lineups that the others don't. But I think that if I were to play one of these backups outside of Eli Mitchell, it actually would be JaMychal Hasty for me, just because he's more involved in the passing game than Travis Etienne. So I think there are game scripts where JaMychal Hasty, is more involved. Like if the Jags are down late, maybe JaMychal Hasty's on the field more. He's actually run more routes the past 2 weeks than Travis Etienne has. He appears to be their pass catching back. They're more confident in him. Travis Etienne, certainly a capable pass catcher as well. So kind of surprised me to see how little he is involved in the passing game. But with JaMychal Hasty taking on that role in a game that I think is a little bit likelier to go off, I think that JaMychal Hasty would be the next in line for me off the backups after Eli Mitchell.
People are going too far now to disagree with me in the chat, where they're like, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, like no chance for 100 rushing yards, or people, is anybody even like, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, let's not try to be too contrarian here. And but if you guys prefer Eckler to McCaffrey, they're very similar in ownership. I don't think you have a bad point to be made here, but saying that like Eli Mitchell is going to outrun Christian McCaffrey on average, I can't really agree with that. Let's hit on some questions that we just had come in. We've got a super chat to answer. Got some questions in Discord first. I shot him 6 times. I hope that's not an admission, but that is.
Is that Tyler? Is that Tyler in chat?
Yeah, he's not there. Is this why Tyler's really leaving?
Yeah, right.
So I shot him 6 times. ETN or Kittle? I prefer ETN. How about you? ETN or Kittle?
Yeah, it'd probably be ETN over Kittle for me.
And by the way, he's asking for a cash game, which also makes me feel better about ETN.
Yep.
So ETN or Kittle, and then Everett or Ingram. Ingram and ETN.
Yep, same.
So those are the answers that we have there. And then a question in our Discord channel. This is from Ghetto Farmer Boy. Am I being mindful of salary today? So Neil, do you have any differences in how you would look at the amount of salary used in lineups for this slate compared to I guess any other regular DFS NFL slate?
Nope, I'm not doing anything to limit my salary like I do on Showdown. I'll set a salary cap on Showdown. Not doing anything there. And I also in NFL contests in general, I don't set a minimum salary, and I'm certainly not going to here on a 2-game slate. So yeah, I'm not really factoring in salary at all in how I'm building.
Yeah, I build the lineups in Fantasy Cruncher. I don't set any rules for minimum or max amount of salary. The only thing that I have changed, and I know Neil is going to be on the same page with me for this because we've talked about it, many times in recent weeks, I change the amount of max players I allow against the defense. So Normally, regular season, we're looking at, 11, 12, 13 game NFL slate. I'm not playing any defensive players against position players they're going up against. You kind of have to for this slate. And not only do you have to, I have it set on both DraftKings and FanDuel to allow 3 players versus defense. Defensive scoring is just so random. You get a punt return for a touchdown that is not only would that help the defense, it would actually help the opposing offense skill position players as well. So I just don't really care about defense versus position players on a 2 game slate. I just remove defenses from DFS entirely. I'd be perfectly happy. It's totally random. It's hard to predict.
Yeah, so I'm with you. So I changed my offensive players versus defense to a max of 3 players. I even thought about doing more than that. I think you could. It's reasonably set that even higher. And then the one other thing that I do differently, off the top of my head, at least one other thing I do differently on a 2 game slate versus a full slate is I actually allow up to 5 players from a team on a 2 game slate like this. On a full slate, I usually set that at 4. So it would be, I can potentially have the quarterback with up to 3 weapons. But typically I set it at 4, and I allow for up to 6 players from one team today.
Yeah, that as well. No issue with that. Obviously, FanDuel, the max is 4. I would have no problem going up to 4. And then for DraftKings, you could go bigger as well. If a team blows another team out, like let's say the Jaguars go out and they win this game, 35-7 or something like that, there's a pretty good chance that non-slot Jaguar stack is going to do some damage in tournaments. So yeah, I do think that in terms of restrictions, you want to be less restrictive for these kind of slates, just because you really limit the kind of options you have. Is there anything that you want to talk about when it comes to the running backs?
No, I think that we covered them fairly well. As I said, I mean, we both have a ton of interest in McCaffrey. I guess here's one more thing. I will allow 2 running backs from the same team, often on a full slate. I might group that out and say at most 1 running back from the same team. I actually have some lineups that have both McCaffrey and Eli Mitchell in them today. And I think that's totally viable. So that's my last point on running backs. You can play 2 running backs from the same team, although it's not something that I love to do, that I'm seeking out like I do in Showdown, but it's something I'm allowing.
Yeah, and by the way, if anybody wants access to all the tools that we have over at Stokastic, you could get a 5-day free trial for the new year. We extended from 3 days to 5. And I think this is really going to be helpful for football. This is why in a lot of recent meetings, Lofty and I have been pushing for this, because we want to make sure you guys are getting access to more slates, which you weren't getting with the other trials, particularly for some of the primetime NFL slates. So now, if you guys are signing up at Stokastic for the first time, you click on the link below, you get 5 free days of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Here's what that's going to cover: the Saturday main NFL slate, the Sunday main NFL slate, and the Monday Night Football, which I don't know why the NFL has started to stretch the games out like this. It's good for us for DFS. We get an extra day of football. It seems like a little bit of an unfair advantage for the teams that have to play on Monday, and then they get the shorter turnaround. That aside, though, it helps us. We get extra DFS contests. Sign up for a free trial, 5 days. You're getting access to Showdown tools, and then also all the tools we have: player projections, ownership projections, our lineup generator for all of the slates that we've spread out throughout the week. So go check that out if you guys want to see all our tools, and if you want them for free, because that's a pretty good price. Let's talk about the running backs now. I mean, the wide receivers now. And, it's funny, as loaded as we are at running back, Neil, can't really see the same about wide receiver. The most expensive wideout on FanDuel is Keenan Allen at 8,400. On DraftKings, he's the most expensive at 7,000, which is also another reason I think it makes sense to spend up at running back today. We just don't have wide receivers to spend up for, so that's what makes it come into play more. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, easier to go to, and we don't have these top wide receivers to spend up for, but we do have Keenan Allen at a price point of his own on both sites, and he's also benefiting from the absence of Mike Williams. So how high of a priority is Keenan Allen for you today?
Yeah, he's going to be in a majority of my lineups. More than half of my lineups will have Keenan Allen in them today. As you said, no Mike Williams. It's a great spot. Keenan Allen is a PPR monster. He should have plenty of opportunity to rack up catches, yards, potentially touchdowns. So yeah, I like Keenan Allen quite a bit. And as you said, he is in a tier by himself price-wise at 7,000. So yeah, I'm playing a lot. I actually had to cut back his projection to not get 100% of Keenan Allen to get to what I consider a reasonable. And I still have 65% Keenan Allen currently. But you could, I think it's viable to fade him, but as I said, I have 65%. So I'm actually above the field on Keenan Allen. He just projects really well. It's a great spot. How about you? How much interest in Keenan Allen for you?
Yeah, if I run my lineups with a not crazy high amount of randomness in Fantasy Cruncher, you get to almost all of the Keenan Allen, right? So I actually ran a build before where I had just kind of curious. I did builds with different amounts of randomness to see what the different percentage of players would come out as. With 10% randomness, I ended up getting to 95% Keenan Allen, which says this to me: at large field tournaments, you have the ability to spend up for wide receiver. You guys should be going to Keenan Allen. In cash games, also absolutely play Keenan Allen. So I think that Keenan Allen today is the top of the spend up wide receivers, like getting to him a bunch on both sides. A little bit easier to get to on DraftKings than FanDuel for sure, just because FanDuel, he's priced up to $8,400 as I accidentally closed that screen. So I think Keenan Allen, really high priority play, especially in the absence of Mike Williams. Is there another wide receiver that really comes into play for you for the Chargers with Williams being out? So behind Keenan Allen, who is the next highest priority amongst the Chargers wideouts?
Yeah, it's obviously Joshua Palmer steps in. He is now the wide receiver 2 for the Chargers, gets a really significant bump without Mike Williams there as a wide receiver 2. He's just 5,300. We have positive leverage on Joshua Palmer, 33% projected ownership, 40% chance of being optimal. He looks great today. I'm going to have a lot of Joshua Palmer. And then behind that, DeAndre Carter just comes into play now. Like he was somebody that, you could play him as a, hope that somebody gets hurt ahead of him, or, a low probability type of play. Now he's a wide receiver 3 and he's 3,600. So DeAndre Carter just becomes a player that you can consider in your lineups. 24% projected ownership, 31% chance of being optimal. He looks pretty good as well. So those are the 3 that I'm playing here. I don't think I'm going to any Michael Bandy or anything. I think I'm just playing those 3. Who do you like from the Chargers?
Yeah, it's hard to not like Joshua Palmer. And the other thing, too, is when we were talking about before how much harder it could be to find value on some of these 2-game playoff slates because teams like to play their stars. Well, the Chargers might like to play the stars a little bit too much, as people have talked about ad nauseum on Twitter, with Mike Williams playing in a totally meaningless Week 18 game for the Chargers gets hurt. Well, guess what? That's a stud the Chargers cannot physically play today. This is one of the only value spots we really have. So Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, especially at his price point, I think is easily the best punt type play that we have of the day today, just because where else are you going to find that kind of value today? So I think Carter is actually going a little bit overlooked on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He's one of my favorite value plays on the slate. And then Palmer as well as a mid-range option, but $5,700 for Carter with low 20% ownership on FanDuel. DK as well, 23% ownership at a cheap price point. He's probably the value play that I'm going to be the most overweight to. Is that unreasonable to you, or do you think that makes sense?
DeAndre Carter, yeah, I think DeAndre Carter makes a lot of sense as the value play you go to. I will say Marvin Jones right there, just below him at 3,400, is also fairly interesting. Not going to get a ton of ownership. He's been playing more than 50 running routes on more than 50% of passing plays for the Jaguars. So I'd say he's the next up. But yeah, DeAndre Carter, probably my slight preference of the 2. Also, I see Quinn saying that they may have voided the contest. Now I'm seeing contest was voided. I assume that's talking about FanDuel. Did they void all their contests?
Let me see. I mean, I'm sure this will go over well on Twitter.
Scott Foster, this is not my fault. I'm not even playing on FanDuel today. He seems to be blaming me for this, for FanDuel going down. I had nothing to do with it, I swear. Though. It's Tyler. Tyler did this.
Here's what's weird. I still blame Eric when anything goes wrong. But
that's a good point.
Here's what I don't understand is they still have other contests up, it looks like. So why, I don't see the $5 anymore. It appears that was voided. Why does the $5 get voided, but the other ones don't? It's not like the display error was only affecting one contest.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. So there goes my last 35 minutes of trying to build lineups while talking to Chase Overlay. And now not only they just deleted the overlay, it doesn't exist at all anymore. So that'll be a mess. I'm very excited to go on Twitter 20 minutes from now when the show ends to see what kind of responses that we've gotten. But let's talk about the other wide receivers and another player that I really think is going overlooked. Deebo Samuel is super talented. He is $5,700 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Deebo is $6,900. It's a 2-game slate, so of course he's popular, but it's not like he's crazy popular relative to that price point. We're looking at ownership, 35% for Deebo on DraftKings, FanDuel, or 33% on DraftKings, 35% on FanDuel. I think it's a little light on Deebo just based on the potential for, like I was talking about before, where we could see studs get more of a workload. Don't be surprised if Deebo Samuel is more involved in both the passing and the running game today. We know they like to give him some carries from time to time as well. I'm willing to bet on just the talent of Deebo Samuel and make him my priority of these mid-range type wide receivers, because it's not all that long ago that Deebo was considered one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He's not quite viewed that way anymore, especially not from a fantasy standpoint, but I still believe in the talent. So what are you going to do with Deebo Samuel?
Yeah, I'm with you. Deebo is very interesting here. just clearly too cheap. I think it's even more so the case on the showdown slate. If anybody's playing that, Deebo is just way too, he's like 7,200 on showdown for some reason. But yeah, even on the main slate, Deebo 5,700, that is just too cheap for Deebo Samuel. I was just thinking about that. Like, so I actually played a good amount of Eli Mitchell, and now I'm having reservations because I'm like, well, what if they just give that backup running back role, like more of that work? I don't think they would cut out Eli Mitchell altogether. He is a very talented running back, but if they use Deebo more in the running game, there's a lot of mouths to feed there, with obviously McCaffrey going to get the bulk of the workload, at least I'm assuming. And then behind McCaffrey, it's like, man, if Deebo gets some carries, that could cut into Eli Mitchell a little bit. But yeah, regardless, I like Deebo quite a bit. And we actually have him looking like he's under-owned in the boom bust. We've got him projected for 33% ownership, 38% chance of being optimal. He looks great today. I like Deebo quite a bit.
Yeah, so that's kind of the priorities for me, the highest priorities for me, wide receiver. It's going to be just in terms, like, there's other wide receivers I'm going to be rostering as well, but the ones that I like the most, it's going to be Keenan Allen, Deebo Samuel, and then DeAndre Carter, Josh Palmer. Of the rest of the wide receivers, who are the highest priorities for you? Any other standouts?
Yeah, so you mentioned Keenan Allen. All of the Chargers guys definitely interesting. Christian Kirk actually looks really good to me against the Chargers. 39% projected ownership, 40% chance of being optimal. That seems like a reasonable. I guess I say he's a priority. I'm not playing like way above the field, but I do think that's a really nice number. Zay Jones is somebody who projects so well that, like, if I didn't do anything to my fantasy structure just based on projection, I was going to get like 100% of Zay Jones. So I should mention him as somebody that, I have a lot of interest. It's 4,300 projected for 35% ownership, 44% chance of being optimal. Of course, I still cut back on Zay Jones. I didn't want to have 100%, but I do think that he's clearly too cheap for his role in the offense. He is the wide receiver 2 for Jacksonville, a fine spot here. So I like Zay Jones a bit. Brandon Ayuk, you can still play. Obviously, Deebo, 100 cheaper, looks better than Brandon Ayuk, but I still think Brandon Ayuk is playable. And I did mention Marvin Jones a little bit. I think he's somebody that could get overlooked. I'm curious to see how ownership actually plays out. So we have DeAndre Carter at 24% projected ownership, Marvin Jones at 20%. It would not shock me to see a bigger gap there, to see DeAndre Carter actually get more ownership, just because he is the shiny new toy. Like, people sometimes see like, oh, we got the news of Mike Williams out, now I can play DeAndre Carter, and nothing has changed for Marvin Jones. So I think that there is some chance. It doesn't really affect. I like DeAndre Carter either way, but I think there's some chance that Marvin Jones goes a little bit overlooked and actually comes in under that number. Maybe not, and maybe people pivot to him too. But if he's at 20% ownership, definitely have some interest in Marvin Jones as well.
Yeah, and let's see. If anybody has any more questions, throw those into Discord for us. I'm also just reading the messages because, like you guys, I don't know what's going on with FanDuel either. Trying to figure it out as we go. But people are kind of melting down about this, and I think this is rightfully so. We see a lot of overreaction sometimes, but yeah, a site randomly canceling a contest 15 minutes before it starts. Not something we see all that often.
I'm wondering if it filled and like they just have no way of turning it off. So they have a mess. I guess I haven't really looked at the app, so I'm just talking with absolutely no context here. But just from what I'm reading, like they put up "do not enter." I'm like, do they just not know how to close the contest? And is that the problem? Like they put in too big of a number or something, and people now are entering when their lineups are not going to count. I don't know. It'll be fascinating to see whether the contest actually runs.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it on Twitter after we're done. But wide receivers. Anything else you're prioritizing? And by the way, it's a 2-game slate, guys. If you guys have, your DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, those kind of players, obviously you could make a case for pretty much any stud on a 2-game slate. I came in underweight to the field on Kirk and on Lockett because, these guys are pretty popular. They're fairly comparably owned to Deebo Samuel, and I just prefer Deebo in that price point. So in terms of priorities, I've kind of listed off my guys, but is there anything else you want to talk about here?
No, I think we have largely, good to bring up those Seattle guys, certainly in play. Both. It's really hard to really differentiate these Seattle guys, but we actually have positive leverage. No, we have negative leverage on both, but it's less negative on Tyler Lockett. Project for 27% ownership, 26% chance to be an optimal. DK Metcalf, there is more negative leverage, 27% ownership, 21% chance to be an optimal. But honestly, these guys, you can play both of them. I'm going to have them mix into my lineups a little bit. They're just not high priorities again because of that matchup. Still, one of these guys could certainly go off. These guys are stud wide receivers, even against San Francisco. they have, the upside for big games. It's just the path is less clear than it is for some other wide receivers. So I'm going to be mixing them in, just not as higher priorities as some of these other guys.
And by the way, for everybody, while we're talking, I can't even get on FanDuel at all now. So that's a whole nother issue. Just hat on a hat, one thing on top of another. Is there any final thoughts you have at a wide receiver, or if anybody's questions in Discord, throw those out at us? Any final comments here, Neil?
Yeah, so I have like one share of Jawan Jennings, and I'm like questioning whether I should, with Deebo back and involved. I'm like, how much is Jawan Jennings really going to be involved? I'm not all that confident in it, but he's the fourth receiver I would consider from San Francisco. I think I'm just considering those main three from Jacksonville. You could consider Jamal Agnew, but he's a little bit gadgety. He could score a touchdown or something. I don't think there's a volume for a 2-game slate. Like, he would need to really put up 10 plus fantasy points at least to be relevant, I think. So I don't think I'm playing any of Jamal Agnew. Yeah, I think we've covered all the wide receivers that I'm playing, I think.
All right, so let's move on over to the tight ends. And listen, we don't have a lot of tight ends to choose from here. We've got Evan Ingram, we've got Gerald Everett, we've got George Kittle, and you'd kind of think at first glance, looking at the tight ends, that George Kittle would be way more popular than what he is. But here's what ended up happening for me, at least. I'm building lineups. I'm looking at the tight end options, and I'm saying I like two guys above all the others. I like George Kittle. I like Evan Ingram. And then I build lineups, and I get to a ton of Evan Ingram and not as much George Kittle as I would like, especially on FanDuel at 7,700, because he is so much more expensive than the other tight ends that he's just kind of hard to build into lineups from an optimizer standpoint. So the player that I'm most terrified of going off today is George Kittle, because I'm finding it difficult to get to him. Is it the same case for you?
Yeah, so I'm playing some George Kittle. So I actually am above the field right now. I'm crunching as we go, and like every other crunch I do, I'll get less or more than the field of George Kittle. I'm right near the field, but yeah, he's so much more expensive than everybody else. You really do need him to separate. Like, he can't just have 12 fantasy points and these other guys get 10. Given the price tag, you need George Kittle to really go off. And of course, I mean, it could be, if he has 15 fantasy points, that might be enough to separate on a 2-game slate. Like, what none of these other tight ends might do, all these other tight ends might do nothing. But I think that's also true of every tight end on the slate. Like, there's a possibility that Evan Ingram has a big game and separates himself. So yeah, it's hard to really prioritize George Kittle. The matchup is obviously good. I am getting probably close to the field on George Kittle. But if you wanted to full fade George Kittle, I think that is reasonable, because we do have, I think Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, both have upside for big games here. So can certainly outscore George Kittle. So yeah, not a huge priority for me. I am actually, in my latest run though, getting more than what we're projecting the field for, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I'm a little bit under him. And by the way, I'm not saying it's a full fade or anything like that. It's just, I ran through it, and you kind of have an expectation when you build lineups. You don't know for sure, but the first run through you do on Fantasy Crunch, which is why I'm always doing, even if it's like a strategy show in the morning, it's not the lineups I'm going to be entering, but I do build just to kind of see like, okay, where would I end up on? And I kind of have a sense beforehand of who's going to be the value plays, who I'm going to be getting to. I was really surprised I didn't get to a whole bunch of, or at least I didn't get to as much of George Kittle as I thought I was going to when I did the build, just because I looked at him compared to the other tight ends and thought, all right, for sure, he's going to end up coming up a fairly decent amount. But the tight end I never really got the most of was Evan Ingram. Huge role for him down the stretch of the year. And it seemed like as Lawrence got better and became more comfortable as an NFL quarterback, it really seemed like a big part of that was locking on to Evan Ingram. So let's take the last couple of games out of the equation. And I know he was targeted 4 times last week. And then the week 17 game against Houston, which really didn't mean anything. We didn't see the starters play most of that game. So only 2 targets for him in that game. 4 targets the week before, though, and then 4 games before that, 8 targets, 10 targets, 15 targets, 7 targets. Ingram has been a key part of the Jaguars passing game as of late. He is my favorite overall tight end on the slate. Is Ingram your favorite tight end, or is it Kittle, or is it somebody else you're getting the most exposure to?
Yeah, it is Ingram that I am getting the most exposure to. I'm getting above the field currently. As you said, he's just become such a big part of that offense, and I think it's going to continue. He's just been really great. I mean, I know he had drop issues with the Giants, and a lot of people had kind of written him off as not a great pass catcher, but he's so athletic, and Trevor Lawrence seems to trust him. I like Ingram quite a bit. What do we have as far as leverage? I don't actually have the boom bust. Let me pull up tight ends in the boom bust. We have Evan Ingram. Yeah, actually, we've got positive leverage even on Evan Ingram. Project for 44% ownership, 47% chance of being optimal. He's not that much more expensive than Gerald Everett. Yeah, I like Evan Ingram quite a bit.
Yeah, so that's the guy that I end up getting to the most. I just think he's by far the best overall tight end option we have when we consider his upside and all of that. And I view Gerald Everett as going a little bit overowned, and I get why people are getting there. There's an expectation of increased target share with the absence of Mike Williams, but he's $5,600 on FanDuel, and then if you look at him on DraftKings, he's $3,800. To me, he's just priced similarly to Evan Ingram, and it's hard for me to build lineups where I'm close in salary between Ingram and Everett and say like, oh, I'd rather click on Everett than Ingram. So I really, really strongly prefer Evan Ingram. Is Gerald Everett somebody who you're getting to very much? Because he's actually picking up more ownership than George Kittle is.
Is he really? Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
going to be under the field on Gerald Everett. Currently, I have him in 13% of my lineups. Just not a huge priority for me. He has games where he is targeted a lot, and he could benefit from Mike Williams being out. So it is possible that Gerald Everett has a big game here. It's possible Justin Herbert locks onto him, but not a huge priority for me. I'm actually, as I said, I have 13%. We're projecting him for 32% ownership. Maybe I want to have a little bit more than 30. Now that I'm looking, I'm like, man, maybe I should have a little bit more Gerald Everett, but yeah, not a huge priority for me. I am going to be underweight to the field. I just prefer Kittle, Ingram. Yeah, and I actually, I guess I'll bring up we've got 7 minutes left. We'll bring up Donald Parham is somebody is probably the lowest owned player that I do have some interest in. I was actually disappointed to see we are projecting Parham for 12.5% ownership. I was thinking he'd be more like, 7 or 8%, which I would have more interest in him there. 12.5% is a little bit higher than I would like it to be, but I'm still going to be playing some Donald Parham just as a guy who, I think we don't have many backups that I think are going to get a ton of run here. I think the Chargers actually do like Donald Parham quite a bit. He's not on the field all that much, but when he is on the field, he gets targeted a good amount sometimes. This year, I mean, he's maxed out at 3 targets so far in a game this year, so hasn't been really a target monster, but he has high value targets as well. He's been targeted in the red zone a couple times already this year, and in the past, he's been a red zone threat for the Chargers. So on a slate where I think it's possible that no tight end really separates themselves, I think that Donald Parham is somebody that I'm interested in playing at relatively low ownership. But again, the 12.5% makes him a little bit less of a priority for me than if he were where I was hoping he would come in around 5 to 8%.
And then the other thing too is you mentioned that Parham not somebody who's massively involved or anything. When he is involved though, it's typically in the red zone.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about particularly for FanDuel where it's only half point PPR scoring and you see a little bit more emphasis on touchdowns there. I mean, if Parham finished with a line of like 2 targets, 1 catch for 8 yards and a touchdown on a 2-game slate, particularly for FanDuel scoring, that could be pretty decent. So I do like the Parham shout out. And like you said, you don't have to play very much for him to get overweight to the field on him. Is there anything else you want to talk about as far as tight ends go?
There's no other real priorities for me. I have a few shares, I think, of Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson. You could play on the showdown slate, but I don't think I'm playing him on the main slate. So it's really just Ingram, Kittle, Everett, and Parham. I have 1 share of Colby Parkinson and actually just 1 share of Noah Fant. I'm probably underselling these guys. Like I probably should have more than I have. It's just so hard for me to want to prioritize non-studs playing against the Niners. It's thin, but we saw it's certainly possible. We saw Darren Waller score a touchdown against the Niners the other week. He's obviously a better tight end than Noah Fant is, but Noah Fant has some talent. Wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world if Noah Fant does score a touchdown here. So I probably should be playing more than I am. I just don't think that he really has the upside for like 80 yards and a touchdown. I would be surprised to see Noah Fant do something like that. So I'm not playing a ton of Fant or Parkinson.
Yeah, I just realized too that I said that I liked Parham a lot for FanDuel purposes, and then afterwards realized, it doesn't matter. Like it was
Right.
just kind of like force of habit where we're talking about the players. I'm going through the lineups I've built, and I'm going back and forth to my fantasy cruncher lineups for FanDuel and for DraftKings. I realized I'm as well just close the FanDuel window. What does it matter at this point? There's no slate, so yeah, I'm just going to close this, and there's really no reason to talk about it because the slate doesn't exist. So you and we typically don't talk much about defenses, but we've got a couple minutes left to go here. And just, do you have any takes or anything strong mentions you want to bring up when it comes to the defenses? 49ers are by far projected to be the most popular, and everything else is kind of grouped together. No real surprise that 49ers heading above all the other teams in terms of ownership.
Yeah, 49ers, obviously great defense. They're the most expensive and not in the best spot against Seattle's offense. So There are knocks against them, but they're just such a great defense. It makes sense that people are going to want to play the 49ers. I think the Seahawks are in play. I don't have a ton of the Seahawks defense, but I have a little bit of the Seahawks. Actually, I take that back. I do have a ton of the Seahawks. I'm about double the field on the Seahawks defense. They are the cheapest, so they will allow you to make some lineups that you can't do with other teams. They're also playing against a rookie quarterback. I don't know that it matters much because I don't think San Francisco's like really throwing it down the field. It's really dink and dunk kind of passes anyway. So Brock Purdy won't have any major chances to screw up, but just the price gives me some interest in the Seahawks. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have any really strong takes as far as defense goes. 49ers, the pretty clear number one option, but they're the most expensive. The field is getting there. The others, you kind of mix and match. I'm spreading out my defensive ownership, not taking any major stands other than, I guess, the Seahawks. I'm getting a lot just because they're so cheap.
All right. We've got G. Berm wanted to know if we could touch on the Seattle wide receivers. I think it's the worst spot of any team on the entire slate by a pretty wide margin. And there's no ownership discount there either. Like Metcalf and Lockett are still both really popular. So I came in underweight to both of them. That's why they didn't come up in terms of my favorite wide receivers. You know, you can't write anybody off entirely on a 2-game slate, but I'm a little surprised that you got guys like Metcalf and Lockett being, you know, just as popular as a guy like Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I'm same page. Like I would prefer playing Deebo Samuel against that Seattle defense versus the opposite, you know. But obviously Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, both studs, and Tyler Lockett has been doing well against good defenses all year, so he can certainly get it done against the San Francisco defense. They're just not huge priorities for me. Actually, now that I'm looking, I'm surprised to see this. I'm actually above the field on Tyler Lockett in my latest run. I don't know. Am I going to run another one in the next 2 minutes? Probably not. I'll keep it. I'm above the field on Tyler Lockett. He is cheaper than DK Metcalf. They're both, you know, fine options. It's really hard to predict which of them is going to go off, but it is Tyler Lockett more frequently than DK Metcalf. So he would be my slight preference, but honestly, it's hard to predict. And these guys both have the ability to go off even in a tough matchup. It's just, I'd rather count on players who are more likely to go off in good matchups.
One more offer for you guys, and then Neil will give out our favorite stack of the entire slate. If you guys don't have a BetMGM account, if you sign up using our link, you get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum, and also your first bet insured up to $1,000. So even if it loses, insurance bet of up to $1,000 there. Most importantly, if you're a DFS player and you're looking for a cheap way to get access to our tools, you click on the BetMGM link that we have, you sign up there, $10 deposit, you get 2 months of Stokastic plus Platinum. Now, let's close out like this, Neil. If you're building one lineup in a large field tournament, what would be your stacking combination? Quarterback to wide receivers. And we'll only talk about it for DraftKings because we don't need to trigger the people anymore.
Yeah, it'd be Justin Herbert with probably Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer. Just go to the studs there. You could mix in DeAndre Carter or even Gerald Everett, but it's probably just going to be Justin Herbert to the studs. How about you?
Yeah, exact same. Herbert, Allen, DeAndre Carter. I most like to run it back with Zay Jones and Travis Etienne. I think this is by far the best game to target. So for reference in our top stacks tool, we have 45% top stack odds going to the Chargers on DraftKings, 26% going to the Jaguars, and then we've got the 49ers at 18%, and then the Seahawks coming in last, just 11%. So we are expecting the first game to be quite a bit higher scoring than the second game. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you didn't do it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck. Enjoy the games today.